A man stood on my porch, holding a casserole dish, like a peace offering. That man was my father. He had not spoken to me in 9 years, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "Your mother's outside. She wants to talk about the business." Not, "I missed you." Not, "How are my grandkids?" The business. Before we get into how we got here, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one. My name is Naomi Hale. I'm 34. To understand why my own father showed up holding a casserole dish like it could buy back 9 years, you have to go back to a town called Birch Hollow, Pennsylvania. Population a little over 3,000. One stoplight. One diner that still took checks. My dad, Walter, ran the only auto shop in town for 28 years. My mum, Carol, ran the church bake sale and the neighborhood watch, with the same iron grip she ran everything else with. My younger sister, Denise, was the golden one, cheer captain, prom queen, the kid my mum bragged about at every grocery store run-in. I was the other one. Good grades, quiet, the one who balanced the shop's books for free every tax season starting at 16 because I was good with numbers. Nobody threw me a party for that. I'm not telling you this to complain. I'm telling you because it matters for what comes later. In my family, attention was something you earned over and over, and I never quite earned enough of it to keep. I left for Penn State on a partial scholarship at 18. That's where I met Eli. Eli didn't grow up with a family at all. He went into foster care at 7 and aged out of the system at 18 with one duffel bag, a library card, and nowhere in particular to be on holidays. He taught himself to code on the public computers because the library was the only place that was warm, quiet, and open late enough to matter. By the time I met him, sophomore year, he was working 3 jobs to pay his own way through school, and he still found time to walk me back to my dorm every single night, rain or not, never asking for anything in return. I brought him home for Thanksgiving in my junior year. My mum served him last, after the dog. My dad asked him, twice, in 2 different ways, "So what do your people do?" Eli answered both times the same way, gentle, no edge to it at all. "I don't really have people, I have me." The table went quiet, in a way I'd never heard it go quiet before, not even during the year my uncle brought up politics at dinner. Later that night, my mum found me alone in the kitchen and said the sentence I still hear sometimes when I can't sleep. "A man with no family is a man with no anchor." Naomi, you don't marry someone like that. You marry someone who has something behind him. I told her Eli had something behind him. He had himself, built from nothing, and that was more than most people in this town would ever manage. She didn't answer. She just rinsed a dish that was already clean and let the water run too long. The way she did when she'd decided a conversation was over whether I agreed or not. Eli proposed 2 years later, in a Honda Civic in a Wawa parking lot, because the heater in his apartment had broken again, and we'd driven around just to stay warm while we talked. About nothing in particular. He pulled a ring out of the cup holder, like it had been sitting there for days, waiting for the right ordinary moment. I called home that night, shaking, half laughing, expecting at the very least a question about the ring. My mother's first words were, "Have you thought this through?" Not congratulations, not even my name first. A question dressed up to sound careful, that was really just a warning with better manners. My dad sent one letter, 2 weeks later, handwritten, on shop letterhead, because we never kept actual stationery in the house. I still remember the line that ended it, word for word, 9 years later. "If you marry a man with no name behind him, you're choosing to start your own family tree from nothing. Don't expect us to water it." I didn't cry when I read it. I folded it once along the same crease it already had, put it in a shoebox at the back of my closet, and went back to planning a wedding for 22 people, none of whom shared my last name. We got married at a county courthouse on a Friday afternoon, between a custody hearing and someone renewing a business license. Eli's foster mother, Ruth, the only one of his 11 foster placements who'd ever actually loved him the way a mother is supposed to, drove 4 hours to be there. She cried through the entire 5-minute ceremony and then took us out for diner pancakes afterward, because that's what she could afford on a fixed income, and it remains, to this day, the best meal I have ever eaten in my life. 1 week later, I mailed my parents a wedding photo, the 2 of us laughing on the courthouse steps. It came back 10 days after that, unopened, a red stamp pressed crooked across the front. Return to sender. That's the night the lockbox started. Not because I sat down and planned some grand collection of evidence. I'm an accountant by training, and accountants keep records on instinct, the same way a carpenter can't walk past a crooked shelf without wanting to set it level. I found an old metal lockbox in the closet of our first apartment, the kind with a tiny brass key that didn't quite fit anymore, and I dropped the returned envelope inside. Then I grabbed a cheap spiral notebook from a drugstore, wrote proof across the cover in permanent marker, and logged it. Item 1. Wedding photo. Sent. Returned. Unopened. I didn't know yet that I'd be writing in that notebook for almost a decade. Year 1, I called home 4 times. 4 voicemails. Never returned. I sent a birthday card for my mum in March. One for my dad in June. Both came back with the same crooked red stamp. My sister sent 1 text the entire year. Total. Mum's really hurt. Maybe give it some time. I logged it anyway, word for word. Proof doesn't care whether it hurts to write down. Year 2. Eli quit his stable software job to build something of his own, a routing platform for small trucking companies, the unglamorous kind of software nobody posts about online, but that saves a 5-truck company real money every single week. He worked out of our spare bedroom on a desk made from 2 filing cabinets and a hollow core door we'd found on the curb. I kept my day job as an operations analyst and came home every night to review his numbers with him over reheated rice. A calculator between us, like a third person at the table. We didn't sleep much that year. We also didn't fight, not once, not about money, not about any of it. Year 3, our daughter Pearl was born on a Tuesday morning after 11 hours of labor. I sent my parents the hospital photo. Returned. I sent the birth announcement 2 weeks later. Returned. Ruth flew in within 2 days of getting the call, stayed a full month on her own dime, and taught me how to swaddle properly because my own mother never once offered to. I added both returned envelopes to the box, items 11 and 12, and I remember thinking, almost calmly, not bitterly, that the box had stopped being about hope a long time ago. It was just about keeping an honest record of the truth, the same way I'd keep a ledger for anyone else. Here's something I didn't expect that same year. My sister Denise got engaged. And I found out from a wedding registry website. Not from her, not from anyone in my family at all. I wasn't invited to the wedding 3 months later. I found out it had even happened from a mutual friend's photos, posted online weeks afterward. I wasn't even a name they had to explain away in conversation. I was simply absent, the way a chair gets pushed in and nobody remembers who used to sit there. Year 4 brought something smaller, almost embarrassing in how much it stung. Pearl's first birthday. I mailed an invitation anyway, more out of habit than expectation by then. It came back unopened like all the rest, but a week later my mother's cousin Linda, who I barely knew, sent me a card of her own, unprompted. Inside, she'd written a few careful lines congratulating me on Pearl and saying she'd heard things were complicated and hoped they'd work themselves out. I sat with that card for a long time. It was proof the silence had a sound loud enough for distant relatives to hear from 3 counties over. Year 5. Eli's company crossed its first 100 customers. Small, steady, unglamorous growth, the kind that builds something real instead of something flashy enough to brag about at a barbecue. We bought a modest house outside Pittsburgh, with a yard big enough for Pearl to run circles in, until she fell over laughing in the grass. Ruth visited every 6 weeks like clockwork, and Pearl called her Gigi before she could properly say grandmother. Gigi was the only grandmother my daughter had ever known. The silence from Birch Hollow had become background noise by then, the kind you stop noticing the same way you stop hearing a refrigerator hum. Until year 7, when something shifted that I almost missed entirely. A trade publication ran a small piece on Eli's company. After we closed a funding round, most people outside the logistics industry would never even register. 2 weeks later, an old high school classmate texted me out of nowhere. Random. But your mum asked about Eli's company at the hardware store yesterday. Wanted to know if it was a real company or one of those internet things. Thought you'd want to know. My mother, who hadn't said my name out loud in 7 years, according to everyone I'd ever asked, was now asking strangers about my husband's business, at a hardware store register 2 towns over from her own. I didn't add that to the box. It wasn't proof of anything yet. It was just a small, cold feeling, like a draft coming through a window I'd been certain was sealed shut for good. A month after that, the same classmate texted again, almost apologetic this time. Your sister's telling people you're doing really well now. Not in a nice way, more like she's keeping score. I didn't respond to that one either, but I did write it down. Item 19. Denise discussing my finances with people I haven't spoken to in years. Then, 3 months later, my dad called the auto shop's old landline through to my office, a number he must have dug out of a Christmas card from years back, the last one I'd sent before I finally stopped sending them altogether. I almost didn't pick up. When I did, his voice was rougher than I remembered, like he'd aged a decade in the wrong direction. Naomi, I saw the article. I should have called a long time ago. A pause long enough that I could hear the shop radio playing behind him. Your mother wants to come see you, talk about the future, as a family. I asked him a question I'd apparently been saving for 7 years without realizing it. Dad, did you ever open any of the cards I sent? Silence. Long enough that I counted to 9 in my head before he finally answered. Some of them, your mother didn't know. That was the first time I learned my father had been quietly breaking my mother's rule in private, where it cost him nothing and changed nothing for me, but apparently meant something to him. I logged it in the notebook that night, even though it wasn't a document, just a sentence. Item 20. Dad admits he opened some of the cards, returned them anyway. I called a lawyer the next week, not to threaten anyone, just to understand exactly where things stood before my mother showed up with whatever she had planned. The lawyer walked me through it in 15 calm minutes. No legal claim existed on anything we owned. Our daughter's trust was airtight, set up 2 years earlier almost as a formality. 9 years of clean, well-documented estrangement meant nobody could argue otherwise, even if they tried, and most people in their position never even tried. I thanked her, hung up, and felt strangely settled, the way you feel after closing out a set of books that finally balance. The numbers were already on my side. The only thing left to settle was the truth, in person, on my terms. Denise texted 2 weeks before my parents' visit. The first time she'd reached out to me directly, just me, in 9 years. Hey, been thinking about you. We should catch up sometime. 6 words and a smiley face. After nearly a decade of silence, I agreed to meet her. Mostly out of curiosity about what 9 years of nothing sounds like, once it suddenly wants something from you. She picked a coffee shop near my office, hugged me a beat too long, told me I looked so put together, 3 separate times in under 10 minutes, and then spent the next 40 minutes asking questions that weren't really questions at all. How big was the house? Was Eli's company still doing the funding thing? Did Pearl go to private school? Were we the kind of family that did Christmas big now? 26 questions I counted, the same way I count everything, the same way I've counted every silence, and every returned envelope for 9 straight years. She never once asked if I was happy. She never once said she was sorry. Not for the wedding, not for missing Pearl's first 5 years, not for any of it. When we hugged goodbye, I caught her phone angled toward the parking lot, toward my car, not subtly at all. Cataloguing. Building a report for somebody. I drove straight home and wrote it down. Item 24. Denise. 26 questions, 0 apologies, 1 photo of my car taken without asking. My father called again the night before the visit, and this time he said something my mother clearly didn't know he was saying. She's bringing a proposal, Naomi. I think you should know that before she gets there. I tried to talk her out of it. I'm sorry I never tried that hard for you, back when it would have actually meant something. He hung up before I could answer, and I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Somewhere between grateful and furious that it had taken him 9 years and a funding announcement to find that particular sentence. They arrived on a Saturday morning, my mother first, walking up the path like she already owned it, my father a step behind her, holding a casserole dish, like an apology he hadn't found the right words for yet. I let them in. I didn't make coffee. Coffee is for people who are staying long enough to drink it. My mother sat down at my kitchen table without being asked, and pulled a folded paper tip from her purse, reading from it the way you'd read minutes from a meeting nobody wanted to attend, a retirement contribution, a roof repair, a starter fund for Denise's son, a monthly amount going forward, as a family should provide for each other. 4 line items. No name attached to any of them but mine. No apology attached to any of it at all. Not even a token one, not even for show. I let her finish completely. Then I got up, walked to the hallway closet, pulled down the lockbox, and set it on the table next to her folded paper without a word. You brought a list, I said. I brought one too. I opened the notebook to page 1, and read it the way I'd read a quarterly report to a board of people who didn't want excuses. Flat, factual, nothing performed in it at all. Item 1, wedding photo, returned. Item 2, birthday card, returned. Item 3, hospital photo, returned. My mother's face didn't move much, but her hands did, twisting the hem of her sleeve the exact same way she used to when the church choir hit a wrong note during a solo. I got to item 20 and read it slow, on purpose. Dad admits he opened some of the cards, returned them anyway. My father looked down at the table, like it had suddenly become very interesting. My mother looked at him instead of me for the first time since she'd walked in. You knew, she said to him, quiet, almost stunned. Like she'd just found a crack running through a wall she'd spent 9 years insisting was solid all the way through. I should have done more than just open them, he said. I should have mailed something back myself, just once, just to let her know. My mother turned back to me, and for one brief second her voice cracked into something that almost sounded real. I was trying to protect this family. From what? I said. A man who built something out of nothing instead of inheriting it. A daughter who didn't need you to survive, so you decided that meant she didn't need you at all. She didn't answer that. She picked her folded paper back up off the table, like some part of her still believed it had a chance of working. I'm not writing you a check, I told her, not because I can't afford it, because the day I do, you'll tell yourself the 9 years were just a rough patch instead of a choice. They weren't a rough patch, Mum. They were a choice you made, year after year, every single time a card came back to me in that same envelope. She stood up first, smoothing her coat like she was preparing to leave a meeting that hadn't gone her way. My father lingered a second longer, looked at the lockbox, looked at me, and said the only thing in that entire conversation that felt genuinely earned. Can I call Pearl sometime? Just to talk. No conditions attached to it. We can start there, I said. Slowly. You earn the rest, the same way anyone would. My mother was already at the door by then. She didn't look back once. The casserole dish sat untouched on my counter for 2 full days before I finally threw it out, dish and all, foil still sealed over the top. Denise texted once more after that, a single line, nothing else attached to it. You could have just helped us. I never answered. Some texts answer themselves, if you let the silence sit long enough to do the talking for you. The lockbox is back in the closet now, 24 items, 9 years, and I genuinely hope I never have to write a 25th. My father calls Pearl every other Sunday now, 15 minutes, no money talk, no agenda hiding underneath it, just questions about her drawings and her favorite cartoon and whatever new word she's learned that week. It's small, it's not nothing. My mother hasn't called once, not even to ask how the first conversation with Pearl went. Here's what 9 years taught me, and it isn't the neat lesson you'd probably expect from a story like this one. Forgiveness and trust were never the same transaction. You can forgive someone completely and still keep the lockbox in the closet, just in case. You can let someone back in halfway and still mean it when you tell them the other half isn't free, and never will be, just because the math finally worked out in their favor. Family was never the people who shared my last name. It was the foster mother who drove 4 hours for diner pancakes on a courthouse wedding day. It was the husband who built something real out of nothing, because nobody had ever once told him he couldn't. If someone in your life only remembered you once the numbers changed, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments below. And if you've ever kept your own version of a lockbox, just to remember that you weren't the one who walked away first, hit subscribe. I've got more of these stories coming, and I think you'll want to be here for them.